Welcome to the Practice You podcast. My name is Elena Brower. Together, we'll explore and enjoy content and conversations around mastering transitions in our relations, our wellness, our careers, our families, and especially in our missions and visions. You are invited to learn and love and listen with me. Welcome to Practice You. Welcome, my girl.
Hi there. Thanks for having me over.
It's such a pleasure. The great gift that I have today is Claudia Chan in my apartment. Claudia is the author of This Is How We Rise. She's the founder of the She Global Movement. She is one of my most impressive friends, I have to say. I would love for you to give us a little bit of a background on you and how this all began.
Sure. So, I really never had intended on this career in the women's space, but I grew up in New York City. I went to an all-girls high school, and then followed by Smith College, all-women's college, and also just had a very powerful, independent, entrepreneurial mom. So I'm Chinese, and of course, typical immigrant story. They came here with very little and had Chinese restaurants, and just saw her really do it all, right? Like cook and clean and just drive the family and business, and were able to put us through private schools. And I just knew from a very young age that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and just dreamt of it. And around the late 90s, I, started my own company pretty quickly out of college. But a friend of mine and I, we saw this need for girls' night out shopping parties.
That's right.
Right. Do you remember the Shecky's Girls Night Out parties? I know.
I did
that
those.
was the era of, right. Because it was the 2000s era, right? And that was the era of fluff and Sex in the City and Daily Candy, and where the value, every media, every magazine, placed value on women, on the shoes you were wearing and the cocktail you were ordering and the boy you were dating, right? It was very Sex in the City. And it's so interesting that we were just literally consumed in that world that was so image driven, right? So materialistic and vapid. But it's really that was the 2000s era. And so
I never even really wrapped my mind around that moment. I was so busy working.
Right. And if you were a female picking up a magazine or reading an article or watching the television show, you were basically advertised. You need to be beautiful and skinny and have nice things and be in a relationship. I mean, that was really, it's just sort of the power of media, right? And the power of community and the content we surround ourselves with.
In a hetero relationship, by the way.
Yes, exactly. And really you become what you consume, right?
Oh my God.
And so I was brainwashed in all of that. And then I read Half the Sky in 2010, and I just started learning about the state of women and girls.
Oh, Half the Sky, Nicholas Kristof.
Yeah, and Cheryl Woodan. I mean, amazing. But it was just so shocking, and just started studying state of women and girls in the third world, developing countries. And then, of course, learning about the 4 atrocities of maternal mortality, sex trafficking, gender-based violence, all of it. And then started studying, women in the U.S. and, eating disorders were so high to self-esteem. Like, I think it was like 2% of women could call themselves beautiful. And of course, the pay gap and the workplace gaps for women. So just, the aha moment of how is it that as a female, all women's schools, running a women's marketing platform, that I'm not thinking about these issues, and none of my girlfriends are talking about it. So of course we're not making progress, because you need women to drive change, to change those issues. So that was the first iteration of She Global, was the first She Summit conference. The She stood for She Helps Empower, and to really expose women to these topics and get them to realize 2 things. One is to realize their highest potential, that they can be leaders and change agents.
Yes.
And actually we can, and what matters to you, and to drive change for what matters to you.
Yes.
And then the second was to lift other women and to drive change and to start movements. So it's like twofold. It's like you need to realize your highest potential and rise, but then you need to lift and drive change for that bigger context, right? So that was really always that's sort of the first part of She Global. And the idea was, women are so powerful. And if you look at the potential of the unlimited power that we have, but yet most are not tapping into a fraction of it. At least that was back then.
It was true back then.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And now, of course.
Which is why you shone so brightly to me back then.
Thank you.
Truly.
Thank you. It was definitely a new thing, right? I mean, talk about transitions and talk about, innovation means seeing the invisible, right? When you see the invisible, you can do the impossible. But it's the most scary and courageous path because you're not following. You're filling a hole or a void, but you're not following where everybody else is going. And I remember, leaving my company and starting something new, and all of my friends were, "What are you doing? Women's empowerment? You're interviewing women? Your women's conference?" Like, people just didn't really get it, And I feel like I'm always in that position where I always feel like I'm a little bit ahead of the movements,
Be happy
and
for that.
I'm always creating things that, people don't really understand fully yet.
Right.
And then it becomes like the big thing.
Right. Be happy for that. That's where all of us should be.
Yeah. And I think it's living in the discomfort, right? Living in that, but it's really hard. It's hard to stay immovable and stay in the discomfort. But it's also it's where you make the most change.
Yeah. The first part of your book, when I was reading it, and you started talking about how to make social change, there needs to be 3 steps prior to that. And I thought, but social change, just get out there and start emailing and start talking and start boosting and sharing. The way that you put it, that spiritual growth has to precede personal growth. Personal growth has to precede leadership development, and leadership development is what leads to social change. You can't just go out there without first growing yourself spiritually. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So it's interesting because to lead change and to really take that to its potential. And of course, there's so many levels and layers of affecting change, but, to me, we're not going to fully be able to achieve it to our capacity if we haven't fully evolved as leaders and developed as leaders. And I think leadership development, when I think leadership development, I think clarifying, I have 13 pillars in the book that talk about it, but like being really clear on your purpose and really clear about the problem that you want to solve or what you want to create, the good you want to create. But then it's the, visioning, right? Like being a visionary is a part of leadership, humility, like what are the skills, community building and knowing how to be and work and collaborate with people, to lead teams and to, all these different traits and values. When I think about leadership development, we really need to fully develop in those areas in order to really maximize the impact that we can make.
Right.
But then, are you ready for that leadership development? Are you ready to do that when you haven't really sorted out your personal issues, right?
Personal growth.
And it's interesting too, because there's never an end point, right? And even like now, just the different phases and seasons of life as we all grow and rise into our next level and stages of potential, we're going to bump into new challenges and new things that are going to trigger stuff from childhood or trigger, reoccurring challenges or insecurities or bad habits. And you're like, where is this coming from? Like, I thought I worked this out already in my therapy or
10 years
ago. And like new stuff pops up. And so we need to then be addressing and putting attention there. I've had to do a lot of personal growth around my relationship with money and just growing up in, my family and just the confusion around, value of money. And so, which we can talk about later.
We will.
So I think that, but then how do you really, it's so easy to just give it all up.
Yeah.
It's so easy to just give it all up and say, you know what, this is just, I'm going to just choose mediocrity over extraordinary and just, and just take it easy, right? And toast. But then, so that's why you need spiritual growth, because you've got to be rooted in something that's so bigger than you and believe in something that is just a higher power to me. And so, and the last thing I'll just say is I am a Christian.
Yeah.
And I've been a Christian since pretty much I met my husband 10 years ago, and he started taking me to a Baptist church on the Upper East Side of New York. But it really transformed me. And God is such a big, and again, I say in the book too that, for you could be nature, it could be family, whatever your source is.
Universe.
But I just feel that we need to be rooted in something so much bigger than us, because it takes so much to move our destiny forward, because our destiny is so big, so big.
When you talk about it in the book, actually, your commitment and belief in God and the way that it stands as a masculine figure for you instead of a feminine, I really appreciated that. I like to hear how everyone defines things, and for me, I feel the same. And when you take it into, okay, this is what I think, and you can think this or that, I think people really appreciate that. Then we can move on from there. We have a mutual understanding. Boom.
Yes.
You talk about gender equality, and I love how you started, when you moved on in the book, you started with the need for women and men to collaborate together, and how that is not really yet happening. It feels like it's just starting to happen now, maybe. Can you speak to what prompted you to write about this? Because you write about it so articulately, and it seems so important. You even redefined what SHE meant at a certain point in the book.
So it's interesting, because if you think about, really at the core, This Is How We Rise, and just my overall She Global platform, even though it started off with focusing on women, a few years ago, I changed it to She and He Empower. And now today, the She actually stands for she, he, and the equity of all people, because it's everyone, race, color, all aspects of diversity and inclusion.
Very nice.
But it's humanity, right? Humanity is made up of differences and different backgrounds. And so really the core my mission is to really inspire leaders and people to be change agents, and to drive change or try to take action to create a more equal world. So if you think about the traditional gender equality or women's movement, it was always women in many ways out there fighting for their rights, and women talking to women. And for so long, that's been the movement. But you can't, if the other half of the population's not in the room, we're only going to get so far. And that's been one of the challenges. Right. And so there's been a lot of the movement's evolved a lot. I think that, so the beginning of the book is just wanting you to realize that we all share humanity. We all share the world that we live in. And the way that this humanity can be better is people need to be treated equally. So first part is I just want to convince you that you can be a leader and you can be a change agent. And then it's okay, well, what do you want to lead change in? And I talk about gender equality and the priority to lift women, because women are just, they experience more injustices and inequalities. But then I also talk about, the new men's movement. Right. Because as women are also rising, boys, and what is masculinity, the identity of boys and what it means to be a man is also in a transition. And so it's really to mobilize all people to see problems from where they are and to raise their hand to driving change for something.
Yeah. Compassion, collaboration, and communication, you said, are our gifts, the feminine's gifts. If you had to define or name some of the masculine gifts, how would you?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting too, because even when you think about, I do a lot of stuff with corporate America and big companies. And if you think about the traditional institutions that were ever created, the government, businesses, it was all very built on masculine traits. Yep. Of just being assertive and aggressive, and church and state don't show vulnerability. Like not multifaceted, leave not whole self to work. And so it is, a lot of it is
not whole self to work.
Yeah, exactly. You're not really bringing the masculine way isn't to bring your whole self to work. But again, that's the traditional right. When I think traditional masculine traits. And so. And I think social media, and of course, I feel like the 21st century is really the first feminine traits driven generation, where you have to be transparent today. Transparency wins, vulnerability wins. And so it's really feminine traits now that are starting to permeate structures out there in society. But it's a really interesting transitional time that we are in culturally.
And the men actually, I don't want this to sound aggressive at all, but the men really do need to see the value in collaboration, communication, compassion.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing.
And I think a lot of it, the problem though with the men's movement, and you and I are both raising boys, is that there's so many good men out there, yet, and they see and they are close to their wives or sisters or girlfriends, and they hear and they want to support, but they don't know how. And in a way, you can't just, hey, I want to like be a part of this women's group, or can I join that? Like they're also like, women need to also invite them in.
Yeah.
And we also, the way that I call it also, there's a macro movement, right? So if you think about, Christine Turlington and her initiative around, maternal health, right?
Every mother counts.
Right. Where you talk about like all the different topical movements, right? Like empowering women in financial literacy, single moms,
women for women.
Yeah. I mean, there's just, or like close the gender gap in STEM and girls, I mean, there's so many different issues out there, right? But women and people have started nonprofits, started campaigns, started initiatives, started businesses, and so women are starting things to convene other people around those specific conversations.
Right.
So what we need though is we need men to be like, hey, let's create a men's group to talk about women's issues. Hey, let's create a men's group to talk about women's vulnerability. Let's create a men's group to support, women that are going through XYZ. Or let's, we actually need remember for decades now, women's groups and organizations have been mobilizing, right? And have been being born. And we need that in the men's space now. And because men need forums to talk and share. I know that the millennial men, just naturally, and the Gen Z men generally are more transparent.
Yes.
And there's
research starting to happen.
Right. But the older generation, we need it all. So
yeah, it's starting to happen. My boyfriend and many of his friends are also involved in, there are a couple of great men's groups out there. There's one, Everyman.
That's great. Yeah, I don't know that one.
EVRYMAN.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we need to drive more awareness to those things too, so that other men are like, wait, I want to be a part of that. What's that all about?
Everyman is really cool because they also, at times when they worked at Wellspring, it was run by Sasha and his collaborator, Dan. So pardon me that I don't remember their names, but I'll put it in the show notes. They were running a group at Wellspring that included women.
That's great.
They did the exercise that they do with men, but with women as well. And the women were blown away. More gender equal countries are what we're looking for. More gender equal companies are what we're looking for. Yeah. And according to the research you had quoted, you said that gender diverse companies are actually rising in profits.
Yeah. So basically, it's just all about how gender equality is just good for everyone. It's good for countries. It's good for companies. It's good for profits. It's good for the family.
Yeah. Healthiest sharing household roles.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of research that shows just how the more men and women, again, are synergizing at home, the healthier the man is, right? It's like the less stress they have and
longer life expectancy.
Exactly. So, but yeah, there's tons and tons of research out there around how when you have more gender diverse and just overly diverse workplaces, that those companies perform better.
Right. Your 13 pillars, that's really where I want to go.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm excited. I'm going to read them out, and then I think we should pull out a few, tease out a couple that you feel strongly about talking about. Purpose, vision, faith, resilience, energy, productivity, a loaded one, humility, gratitude, grace, community, self-love, courage, and mindfulness. Where should we go first? I'm going to do a little reading.
Yeah, I think that I guess purpose is a good one to talk about, and then maybe go to just resilience, and because those challenges, man, just
so serious,
so and ongoing. So purpose to me, I think that it's just the fundamental place to start. And because I think the word is also really a loaded word because it's like, don't tell me to figure out my purpose. It's like been such a big word because people have lots of different purposes. And so I talk about holistic purpose in the book, which is I think that, and I think that it's really identifying holistic purpose. What is your purpose in your personal realm, which is to me, my family, my health, things are much more personal, right? My passion, what makes me happy, finances, those things, to what is my purpose in the social realm,
Right.
and what is going to impact others. Like so much of actually what being a Christian, Christianity has taught me, and just overall the premise of the book is that, if we live in a democracy, and if we want to continue to have the freedoms of a democracy, we cannot just sit back and not do anything, right, for the issues that are out there. Because really, like, we have all these privileges because of people,
Yeah.
not entities or organizations or governments, but specific people who have created that change for us. So at a certain point, if you look at the future, if we only have a small percentage of society of people that are actually trying to do good for communities, then eventually all that good stuff's going to run out, And it's our job in life. I talk a lot about also when I think about holistic purpose and our calling, to me, not just live our life in the world, but to lead our life for the world, and to think about, what does your life mean for the world? And so there's 7.3 billion people on the planet. I'm Claudia Chan. I'm one of those people. To me, God has a purpose for me. And so, yes, I'm meant to enjoy and aim for things that will benefit me personally. My kids, I hope they get to go to good schools. I hope that I'm able to provide for them, and we're able to travel and see the world, and yada, 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 and have a good life. But at the same time, I'm also meant to contribute something to society while I'm here. If I get to live to 80, I'm 43. That's 37 years left I have to my life.
That's crazy.
Right. If you start thinking about that, if you start thinking about, there's Claudia Chan, 80 years on this planet, 37 years left, and just again, to start thinking about, it starts reshaping.
Yes.
Then, okay, here I am today. It's January 23rd. And what is my life about? And, what am I going to devote my life to? And what really matters, so that I can really focus my effort. And if I'm killing myself driving this one thing, and I'm like, oh, I just don't want to do this anymore, and this is just not fun, or this is just challenges getting too hard, I then then I have to have that affirmation and that faith in God that this has been called on me. I've been called to do this. And so it makes me, again, I'm plugged into the source of God, who I believe this is my calling, of my societal purpose. So I'm going to keep on driving forward to achieve it. Right. And of course, surrendering when you need to. But so to me, it's, I start to answer the question about purpose is, I think, separating and defining what is your purpose in different parts of your life. And that to also amplify that, to think about not just, what does your life mean for the world? And really it's legacy too. Right? It's not just leadership development, it's legacy development. Like, what are you meant to do while you're here?
And what are you leaving behind?
Yes.
You pointed out in a few different places in the book to start where you struggle, which I really appreciated, because a lot of people will look at this and say, oh, I'm not meant to be a leader. How am I, what you said before, I'm going to coast and settle with mediocrity because I can't do such a thing. The truth is, wherever my understanding of what you were saying, wherever you're struggling, whatever's hard for you, whatever is your most painful historical story, is likely going to be determining how you are able to serve. A woman who's been traumatized is going to be a tremendous force for teaching other women who have been traumatized.
Yes.
For example, I really appreciated that. And I just want to say thank you for that, because I think that part, I'm looking at page 81, and This Is How We Rise, that is going to help a ton of women see where they stand with themselves, and see where they stand in the world.
Exactly. And I think that many people don't know, okay, well, I don't know what I want to do, what good I want to do. Like, there's so many causes that I'm really passionate about this, and I'm passionate about that. And I just often say, start where you struggle, or your pain is your positive impact. So have you witnessed something, or have you been through something that literally hits you in the core?
Yep.
I think it's part that we're like, okay, like my husband was raised by a single mom, and he has this compassion for helping single mothers. And so that hits them in the heart, right? And so it could be so many different things. I mean, I've heard girls were like, we grew up poor, and so financial literacy to me is really important to me, and teaching young people how to do that, right? So everybody has that, but you know it when it hits you in the heart. But then it sort of goes into the vision chapter, which is like, okay, that's just what you want to solve and do good for, but then how are you going to do it? Because you could create a nonprofit, you could join a nonprofit, you can start writing. I mean, there's so many ways that we can use our talents and gifts. And so that's where, it's what is the structure or what is the vehicle in which you're going to take on to affect that change. And so, I mean, we were just talking about Tara and your work and how, 25,000 women entrepreneurs that you've pretty much activated and gave opportunity to become entrepreneurs, and how that's impacting their lives and the financial economic empowerment. I mean, that is like, that plays in the financial empowerment movement and the women's entrepreneurship movement. But it's just and you were, in a way, it's like we were all like the struggling women entrepreneurs, right?
All of us.
And it's really like, that's your story, right? And now here you are, you've created this global platform. And so it's just so incredible. And that was a part of your destiny this entire time, but we didn't know it also when we were journeying through it, right? So I think that, starting where you struggle and really what you're going to create to solve the problem, being really realistic about that to align with your skill sets.
And that leads directly into faith.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and
a huge one.
Faith gives way to resilience.
Yes. I mean, they're really tied hand in hand.
For sure. But the ordering of these is very, very apt.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it so much. I want to open up to the resilience. It's page 105 for those of you that have the book. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor man perfected without trials. I thought it might be nice because sometimes I give homework on the podcast just to think about the most painful aspect of your life, the kind of thing that you want to hide and never remember, and just possibly consider the fact that you may be a teacher of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then from your vision to your faith to your resilience. I also, quickly to backtrack, where do you have the most scarcity in your life and need to build more faith? I love that. I have that.
Me too.
I have it in the love department. It's the funniest thing.
It's so interesting. It's because of the history.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's crazy how we're traumatized. Really, it's like trauma that, because we I feel like everybody might have, for some people it's love and relationships. For me, it's money. For others, it's self-worth. I mean, self-worth is sort of tied to everything, but it's because, we've gone through things in our past, and even though we intellectually know, it's so deep.
What fears can you replace with faith was the other question under faith, which I really appreciated.
Yeah.
Resilience. When you choose to rise to your highest potential, you will naturally face more resistance and more obstacles. Raise your hand if that is true. That's just the law of physics.
Right.
And you go on to say that if you're climbing the mountain with a hard-to-reach destination in mind, there are more steps, more pressure in the ears, more storms to endure. Going further increases the risk of scrapes and even injuries. But as you rise, the rewards get more spectacular, and you develop more strength, agility, and resilience. That's why resilience is the fourth pillar. So talk about, I don't know,
it's
maybe
so beautiful when you say it. You should have just I would have just killed if you did my audiobook. I
love doing audiobooks. I've done a few.
Gosh.
Setbacks are an inevitable aspect of life. I'm hoping that if you're listening to this and you're feeling like you've just had so much resistance and so many obstacles and you really love the sound of all of this, but no, not for you. I want you to know that the more resistance you feel and the more obstacles seem to be in your way, the more resilience you're building. That's what's happening right now. You're literally in the middle of building resilience, and resilience is one of the pillars of what you need to be a leader. So any examples, any wisdom?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that and say that I show sort of a graphic of a life mountain, and and I think that, right. And it's interesting how, I feel like we are we feel like we're making progress. So we're climbing up the mountain, and then, obstacles hit us, and then we think that we step backwards, right? We think we go down, but even though we do get hit in our life, and again, when we choose when we choose to be leaders and to do courageous things, and we choose to make impact and not have the safe and the mediocre and we choose extraordinary over ordinary, right? We're going to face more challenges. It's inevitable. But the thing is, when those challenges hit and you go down or you go back, you're still rising. You're still higher than you were yesterday, right? So it's just God's way, or the universe's or spirit's way of growing us and building us. And so obstacles to me, and I think of obstacle courses, but they build your resilience muscles, but they could be your courage muscles,
perseverance,
all of it. And I think that they can also direct you. It could be the universe or God, redirecting you or protecting you. I was late to our meeting today because there's a big corporate partner that we've had at She Global for multiple years that, all of a sudden is giving us a lot of different news, and our partnership just might be transitioning. And so it's a big chunk of our business. But I know that something is going to come out of this, right? That is meant to be, that's going to be the right thing for us.
Yeah.
And so you go through it. It sucks to go through it because you want it to flow. You want it to be easy, but then we're never really learning and we're never cultivating new skills if everything is just always so flowy and easy. Yeah. So it's multiple seasons that are going to make us deeper and more beautiful in what we know.
And more mature.
Yeah.
Obstacles mature you. You brought in humility, patience, flexibility, gentleness, and vulnerability. This may be of use to you if you're listening, that instead when you feel an obstacle, instead of getting more aggressive, more focused, more active, at certain times there's actually a way to step back and soften, which I've definitely found to be true in my own life, both personally and professionally. And it seems to really help other people in the space recalibrate when things are changing and transitioning.
Well, it's interesting because when you had Vira Yoga, and back when Anusara Yoga was a thing.
It was a thing.
It was a big thing. And I mean, it was really,
we know each other for so long.
Right, I know. And the immersions, it feels like yesterday though to me, but I did like an immersion with Laura and Susanna. Basically, but one of the fundamental things that I learned that always stuck with me in building the first She Global was muscular and organic energy.
Yes. Bless.
And how the idea was like the first thing you do is to soften, right? It's like in every yoga pose. And so it is so true that certain times you do need to apply that muscular energy, and you do need to control it, and you do need to own it and like take that baby home,
Yes.
Or there are times where you just gotta be like, I'm surrendering now.
Yes.
This is just,
yes.
And I think that in moments when we try to over control things and it continues to blow up and it continues to cause more stress, I mean, that is just clearly, you're like, okay, I'm going to just back off now.
Back off.
Yeah.
Very good. We go from there to energy. Energy, the invisible messages exchanged between people.
Yeah. It's just, I think it's just one of those things that people so undermine and don't value. But energy is so powerful and has so much force. Like if you want to get ahead in life and you want to form those partnerships or get new clients or, or meet someone romantically, and energy is and what we project. And it's just amazing how just to be cognizant and intentional about our smile, our facial expressions, the way we say things, and not just to say, oh, I'm going to just be who I am and that's it, but that to actually be intentional about it.
I had a teacher once say that I should study my face when I'm walking down the street and I don't think anyone's looking at me. Mm. And sure enough, I started to see this kind of not such a nice face. Mm. I would walk by a window and just try and catch myself, and it wasn't the nicest. You say in the book on page 121 that attitude is the physical and verbal expression of one's energy. I appreciated that too, because I think people think, oh, attitude is always a negative thing. You have such an attitude, but really attitude is exactly what you choose. Mm-hmm. And if you have a positive energy, a positive attitude, you are going to be productive. That's it. It will happen.
Yeah.
You will
positive
produce.
Attitude equals positive results. It truly is. Yeah. And it's amazing how we just forget these things too.
Yeah.
Again, I have to go back to it and I have to practice it. It's like exercise. It's your yoga practice. It's totally. You got to just keep on practicing it. And, but You truly do. I'm actually reading Neville Goddard right now.
The
Do you know?
best.
Oh gosh, about
my
just
God,
how
the best.
believe it in and how, truly believing and imagining anything is possible based on what you imagine. But you have to imagine it to give it the opportunity for it to become real.
Yep.
So you are what you think. And, I think back to like, again, resilience and energy and all these things and faith. It's like just staying in the positive and staying in the abundance.
Yep.
And like, you almost have to be like an Olympic trainer, like
In your mind.
in your mind.
Yes.
And I don't think people realize
How important
how
it is.
important that is and how that can transform your life.
You have a meditation practice?
I do. For me, it's more prayer and time with God.
Beautiful.
So
That's really nice.
my brain is I have so much going on in there.
Yeah.
So I can't just really sit and be quiet and focus on my breath.
Got
It's
it.
very
I got
challenging
it.
for me.
Got it.
Unless it's a guided meditation. But yeah, for me, it's like sometimes just verbal prayer.
That's beautiful. What's nice is in the 13 pillars at this point, it sort of shifts from productivity over to humility.
Mm-hmm.
And then from humility follows the grace, gratitude, grace, community, self-love, courage, and mindfulness. At what point did you come up with these 13 pillars? And I'm very grateful for the flow of them, because I think we really do have to take everything by the horns and go. But we also do have to realize that at a certain point, as you just said, there needs to be humility. There needs to be a recognition of a higher force. There needs to be gratitude and grace. Yeah. And then you can cycle back over to courage and
they dance. They're all intertwined. All of it is intertwined, and they all dance with each other. And it is, but it's interesting sometimes when I'm going through something and I literally will just go through the 13 and I'll be like, oh, I'm doing really good on purpose and vision and but I'm really weak right now on energy. Like my energy sucked lately, and I'm not having any faith right now.
Ooh.
And so when you do a check like that, or which impacts my courage,
yes,
and it impacts my energy. So then I'm like, that is what, like, I need to be intentional about that this week. I need to meditate on that. I need to pray about that this week. So it is sort of a mind. If we want to grow and we want to take our claim the destiny, the extraordinary, unlimited potential and destiny that is ahead of us, it takes this work because we are human, and external things happen in our lives, things trigger us, and obstacles are going to be ahead of us. And, we need to be able to manage all of that. But I do end all of it. I take people through, humility to me is a big one, because we stop learning when we think we know it all. Like you literally just, you stop learning, and life is a constant, ongoing, just experience of learning and growth. But then, and I think that it also limits us, right? If we think that we know it all, we're just not going to get that much further. We're going to pretty much stay put. In terms of self-love, I mean, that's obviously a huge one, because it's, we've got to our fundamental worth and believing that we can be all of this. But I end with mindfulness, because it's really then the meditative practice of just what I just said. It's like, okay, I'm weak in these 2 or 3 things. It's the mental, it's whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's prayer, whatever works for you.
But what you're saying really is self-observation.
Yeah, exactly.
And use the pillars to observe yourself, see where you're at with regards to each one of them. It is super helpful.
Yeah.
Chapter 18 for the last, treat your whole life as the organization you are leading.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Wow.
Let's just say that again.
Treat your whole life as the organization you are leading. That, to me, is exactly what the last 5 years have been about for me, and watching all these women rise up, and in the last 15, 20 years watching you rise. You're treating your whole life as the organization you are leading. Why should one part be different from another part? And I think this is something with which we have to struggle every single day. We have to remember to believe. We have to remember all of these pillars. And we have to remember your personal life, although it is different from your business, is not actually different from your business.
It isn't.
The way you lead your personal life is the same. It's going to drive, the business will drive your personal life will drive your business.
Right.
I'm learning that every single day. Yeah. Remembering.
It's whole life leadership. It's really, and again, back to leadership was really designed women have really not ever thought of themselves as leaders because you think, okay, that's a head of state. That's like the person that runs the company, who owns the business, and I think that, again, that's why we need, this feminine definition. And because of technology and all where we are in culture today, women have had all this opportunity. Entrepreneurship is an all-time high for women. And again, women are changing the game because they have to, raise kids, and they are really, you have to figure out how do you really integrate all those aspects of your life. So whole life leadership is thinking about, that's how I've been able to get it all done. I literally think of like, okay, these are all the departments or titles. Like I'm mom, I'm wife, I'm responsible for my own self-care and health, finances, my business, my team, right? So if you start, like, I probably have about 8 or 9 titles. Yeah. And so John also calls me chief social officer of the family because I'm also in charge of like just getting out with friends and having date nights. And but I think that when you start thinking of it that way, it is easier for you to manage everything more, right? It's an integration and it's wholeness as opposed to this is
separate things.
Exactly. And so I think that that's a way, and you have to invest money in all of it. Many women lean back and they give up that job because childcare is so expensive and the financial difference, they'd rather stay at home. But then you're really then giving up. Actually, not so much today, because today you can actually go back to work because every company is trying to get women back to work. And there's returnship programs. But, your confidence is often, and your identity is often impacted when you give up your work.
I feel like a lot of the women with whom I'm dealing now are actually working from home or aiming to be working from home, which is an interesting quandary too. And in chapter 19, as you close the book, you say, lead from where you are. And you point out how we often think the answers that we're seeking are so far away from us, are so not where we are right now. How am I ever going to get where that person is or where I want to be? And I just want to point out, if Claudia and I are any example, we were 2 little kids, like scraping by in New York City. And we both lost a parent. We both have kids. We're both building every day.
Everything's relying on us. Like we're holding all of it.
Totally.
Employees and responsibility.
And you can. And as she said, lead from where you are. Just start and consider yourself a leader where you are. See yourself as such and start to do those steps of spiritual growth, personal growth, leadership development. There's everything online. You can develop all of those 3 buckets for yourself online right now, anywhere, for free. Start to develop, start to create your vision, start to go through all these pillars and see, where am I shining, where am I lacking, and start to build. Know when to step back, know when to keep going. But in the end, as you said in the conclusion, which I really appreciated also, all roads lead to character. Yes. So nice.
Yeah. And I think that that's also, what I think is with my book is I talk about outside in and inside out thinking. And so outside in is, you're listening to Claudia and Elena right now. And it's like, you're thinking about from the outside in, like, okay, well, I need to do this. I need to do that. But when you start thinking about, again, I'm just going to say God, but you can say universe or whatever is your source. But if there's somebody else looking at you, and again, you were to think, okay, there's Claudia, and what is she meant? Like, what is the being that she is going to represent, while she's here? Like, Earth is it's temporary. Life is temporary, right? And so when we start thinking about ourselves from the outside in perspective and how much time we really have left, and I mean, not to be negative or get depressed about that, but just to empower us to really.
It's just reality.
It's reality. And I think that the more, and starting from that bigger place and working backwards impacts how we think about our choices. We're not so caught up in the minutia of like the tasks and the to-do list.
Right.
But that this is, your destiny is greatness, and how much you claim that destiny that is yours relies a lot on your choices. And your choices, it's not an easy path, but it's, your choices are going to shape your character and who you become. I love this quote that a pastor says is like, your schedule is less about what you need to get done and more about who you need to become.
So good.
And I think it's about, and it's not about what you do, but it's about the who, like the who you are and not the what you do. It's about the who and not the do. And so who do you want to be? Who do you want to become? What do you want your life to stand for? What dent do you want to make on the universe or in your community or for whatever matters to you? And that is what you're leaving behind too, right? If you do have kids or, and you have 25,000 kids, in terms of lives that you're impacting with doTERRA. But, it's when you start thinking about your life through that lens, you start looking at your to-do list a little bit differently and the choices that you want to make. I'm like, oh my gosh, like sometimes I wake up and I'm like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? It's like so much to do. It could be like doing my 1099 taxes or like whatever, something so silly.
Yeah.
And it's really just so insignificant. I mean, it's, it just changes your perspective of like, yeah, I'm going to just do that in my sleep. Like that's just I'm not even worried about that, right? I'm worried about this and that and those bigger things that are really going to move the needle.
Yeah. And then it always comes down to who you are and how you're being. I like to read poetry. And so I've pulled out, I have a collection of Pixie Lighthorse's books. I'm going to leave this with you as a gift. It's one of the best. Do you have it?
I don't. I'm
Prayers
excited.
of Honoring. And I'm going to read, I like to pick out a poem for each guest. That's becoming a tradition.
I love it.
This is called Honoring Community. And this is how we'll close with Claudia Chan. Thank you for the ones who find their way to our sides, our brothers, sisters, tribes, and clans. Thank you for the willingness to take care of one another and value our contributions as a whole. Help us to put the good of the whole before the good of the few. We need your support as we take the next steps to expand. Ease our fears and teach us to gather in a circle of equals. Remind us that a circle has no beginning and no end, and that nature contains innumerable examples of the beauty of co-leading and the sacred geometry of many parts working as one. Manage our defenses, diffuse our bombs, humble us so that we can tune into your divine frequency again and hear each other's joys and cries. Impart to us immense tolerance for the eccentricities in one another, knowing that we have them too. Strengthen our connections and bring us together like family. Remove our irrational fears of moving along the road together and allow us to look at all options for teaming up. Inspire in us the creativity required to dream outside of our insular boxes and single-family homes and instead meet up at the fireside to break bread together and spread our beautiful ideas out on the table like a feast. Lean us into one another's shoulders when we need a little care. Fill us with unassailable hope that our collaborations will yield great harvests. Humble our pace with patience for each other. Slow our progress when we need to take a break to truly appreciate it and understand the consequences. Clear our injuries so we can hear just what's being presented today. Teach us to barter and trade for what we need. Show us new ways of conducting community and commerce that benefit our higher purposes and our fellowship. Remind us that not so long ago our currency was simply trading our best work for someone else's to meet our needs. I'll stop there.
So beautiful.
So beautiful. That's for you.
And community.
I know.
So powerful.
So who you are. The one last thing that I think we promised the listener was the talk about money. And just briefly, what were a few of the driving forces that got you through your, let's say, relationship with money into one of abundance and literacy?
Yeah, for me, it was, my parents grew up, from an aristocratic family in China. But then when Mao took over China, they lost a lot, grew up in Taiwan. When they came to America, it was just, again, that mindset of, Claudia, we're Chinese, we're yellow skin, we need to work harder. And we have to it's like making money. Money was so critical for survival, right? So when you're raised in that mentality, it's almost like, again, they talk about what's your center, like living in this money-centered life, right? Or if money's your center, or if your children are your center, or your partner's your center, it's just like not healthy to have, really your center should be, for me, it's God and it's the universe. But, and so it just was very confusing because, I was able to, the value of it was just placed so high that I felt like my worth and how much money I made. I still feel that to this day, how much money I make defines my worth. Like if I don't have, a certain amount. And anyway, so it's just stuff that has popped up in my life and it's all irrational stuff. But it's crazy how even, if you are having like an argument with your partner, or a parent, or about something, right? And I look at like, oh, this argument is really not about this thing. It's really about money. It's really about my fears around money.
Right.
And so it's just amazing why, when you do look at those conflicts in your life or those massive fears or insecurities or concerns, but you're like, okay, but what am I really afraid of? Like, why does this bug me so much, right? Or why is this so hard in my life? And you look at like what the root of that is, then that, like, again, whether it's love, whether it's money. So yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing is to be aware of it, and to forgive yourself and to know that that belief system was based off of sources and voices that in a way wired you to think a certain way, and that you need to unwire yourself. And there are tools out there. I mean, I know like John Randolph Price has his abundance book and 40 Days of Prosperity. And, there's things that you can do to really start training your mind. But in a way, it's like a neuro pathway, like, like, oh, this happens, ding, 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 this is my fear. It triggers that fear. So just like, I think it's the acknowledgement and then forgiving yourself and just making this decision to create a new story, a new neuro pathway of belief. Yeah. But it takes work.
It does take work. Did you read Kate Northrop's book, Money, A Love Story?
I need to read that one. I know of her.
Nice.
Yeah.
So nice.
Yeah.
It just has you go through a few exercises, the most potent of which is, what is your first memory of money?
Yeah.
And when I remember my mom sitting at the dining room table, the back of her, and I could see how she was frustrated from the back of her. And I could feel her frustration. And every now and again, she was typing more quickly at the time, it was an adding machine. And I always just felt this constriction around money. And it was until very, very recently that I believed that was the truth about money, the energy about money. And I slowly, over many years, had to unravel, just as you said, unwire and then rewire.
Yeah. Unwire,
all
rewire.
Of that.
That's what it is.
And now I see money as energy, money as a fluid force that comes through me and it goes back out.
Yeah.
And if I'm welcoming to it and I believe in its presence, it comes. And if I don't, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's it. One of the main exercises I think you can do if you're listening and wondering how on earth to get past it, just to start looking at the numbers every day. Look at the numbers every day. Keep track of what you spent every day. Look at the numbers, and you'll start to really get an affinity for being comfortable with looking at the numbers. And slowly you'll start to have exactly more of them. But you'll go through the 13 pillars, and you'll start to see, oh, I actually do have a purpose here. And, oh, money has a purpose in my life. And, oh, I have a vision for what I want to do with this money. And I want to give it here. And I want to spend it here. And I want to go there. And I want to serve here. And slowly you'll start to move through your life with a greater understanding of it. And it's a very sweet thing because you're ultimately, the money's coming through you. It's not really coming to you.
Yes.
And you're going to be able to serve more people with it.
Yeah, and the other thing I've learned is that like money is not your source. It's not the source of your supply. It's the output, right? Like getting an award or getting, like somebody giving you a gift, right? It's really like our source is energy. Our source is us, and and I think that it is. But I love that, and I've also been told too. The more you actually, I think so many of us don't want to look at that spreadsheet or don't want to look at the numbers because it's just stressful and you're like afraid of it. But the more you love it and the more you engage it, the more energy flows through you. Exactly. So yeah, I think that is great advice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I could talk like this for a while. Might be the longest one we've had so far.
I was going to say you did an amazing job
taking
me through the book because I love
your book. I love your book. It's just so well written. This is how we rise, people. Claudia Chan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Such an honor.
Really.